Chinese Premier Li Chang outlined a vision centered on international collaboration. Two major open source releases from China this week are turning heads. Mark Zuckerberg with a clearer picture on the overall AI strategy for Meta, and it's all about you.
A team from Stanford and the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub just created a fully autonomous virtual lab made up of AI scientists.
Google DeepMind just dropped a powerful new model called Alpha Earth Foundations. Amazon backing a Fable, the startup behind an app called Showrunner, which some are calling the Netflix of AI. Adobe launched some updates to Photoshop and made photo manipulation just a little bit too easy. Microsoft Edge browser rolled out Copilot mode, which brings an AI assistant directly into the browser. NotebookLM is rolling out a new feature called Video Overviews, which uses AI to turn your documents into narrated slideshows.
What if schools told students to use AI more and not less? That's exactly what's happening across China's top universities, where the message to students has flipped from be careful to get fluent.
OpenAI just launched Study Mode, a new learning experience designed to help students think through problems step by step instead of just spitting out the answers. Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in the world of artificial intelligence. This week, Annie is on a much-deserved vacation, and so I'm joined by a guest co-host, Dr. Ivy Lee. She's a dermatologist. She's a former chair of the Augmented Intelligence Committee and the former chair of the Telemedicine Task Force at the American Academy of Dermatology, and a leader in the dermatology group at the World Health Organization for AI. And she's also my wife. So you could say we have our sons are a little upset about how nerdy and AI oriented our conversations are at home. But Dr. Lee, thank you for joining us as a guest host this week for What the AI.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Jeff. Let's dive into the AI Radar, the segment where we break down the biggest headlines and updates from the world's leading AI players. Think of it as our quick fire pulse check on what's hot in AI this week.
First up, hot on the heels of Donald Trump announcing the U.S. AI action plan last week, China just dropped its own blueprint, and let's say it's taking a slightly different approach.
Well, tell me a little bit more about how these two approaches differ.
Yeah, so speaking at the World Artificial Intelligence Conference, Chinese Premier Li Chang outlined a vision centered on international collaboration. So China's action plan proposed joint R&D, cross-border AI infrastructure, open data sharing, and even literacy training for developing countries. And they're thinking big picture here, calling for a new global AI cooperation organization and warning that AI shouldn't become, in his words, an exclusive game dominated by just a few countries or companies. I can't imagine who he's thinking about when he says dominated by a few countries. It's just hard to think.
That sounds pretty different from the US-led approach that Donald Trump proposed.
Yeah, it sounds pretty different from the Trump administration's plan, which emphasized deregulation, open source innovation, and really scaling U.S. infrastructure, U.S. companies in a, quote, race for global AI dominance. But in reality, the U.S. and China are where most cutting edge AI is really being developed. And the question is about which country's AI will end up being dominant around the world. I think China wants the same thing. They're just trying to package it up a little nicer and friendlier, especially as they reach out to parts of the world that are maybe a little less US friendly than they have been historically. So they're nicer packaging, but I think at the end of the day, the question is it going to be US or Chinese developed AI that is the most commonly used around the world? And they'd like it to be Chinese.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who actually wins this battle, and if their nicer packaging brings countries on board or not. I don't know. We'll have to see. All right. Well, while we're on the topic of China, two major open source releases from China this week are turning heads.
What were those releases?
Well, first up, Alibaba's Tongyi Lab released Wan 2.2. I love the names here. These are fun to pronounce. It's a new video generation model that lets users control lighting, color, and even camera angles for cinematic quality output. It's trained on nearly double the data of its predecessor and beats top competitors like Sora and Seedance in motion quality, scene coherence, and visual fidelity.
And what was the second one?
So second up, there's ZAI's, not XAI here, ZAI's GLM 4.5, a 355 billion parameter model that combines reasoning, coding, and agentic capabilities. It outperforms many of the closed models and autonomous tasks and was released fully open along with its training framework for others to build on.
That sounds pretty useful. But how important are these releases really?
Well, it's true that we see a lot of different releases, and it doesn't seem like the latest benchmark scores are the most important thing. But here's the big picture. 9 of the top 10 open source AI models today are Chinese. From language models to video agents like the two we just talked about, Chinese labs are aggressively building full stack open source AI ecosystem, while much of the West is still debating whether or not to open up at all. So when we talk about China wanting to dominate the world, these open source models are pretty important in terms of what countries outside of the US and China might adopt as they're building their own AI infrastructure.
Well, I think the aggressive approach is definitely tracks for China, and I think they're really trying to accelerate that diffusion in terms of access and implementation.
Yeah, they do seem to be really focused on diffusion. We got a few more China stories later, talk about the focus on diffusion, not just development. But this kind of open source in bringing the world into Chinese developed AI is a really interesting development to see how that plays out, which countries' AIs really end up dominating the stack, particularly when you think about the kind of values that get imbued in these, whether those are Western democratic style values, whether those are more CCP oriented values, what will be used commonly around the world could have some probably underappreciated and difficult to predict impacts in the long run. But they're certainly investing heavily in having Chinese AI available for use around the world.
Well, I think it's a very smart strategy. As you know, diffusion of access, right, is so critical. The faster you get these tools into the hands of people, the more opportunities you have for really creatively adapting and customizing these tools to specific use cases, workflows, and work environments. And I think the facility and the digital fluency that you get with this is incredibly powerful. I do appreciate the kind of warning or flag that you raised in terms of thinking about how our values, right, are going to be imbued throughout the total product life cycle of some of these tools, and what are the unintended consequences, and are there folks with diverse perspectives to really think about and potentially mitigate risks from unintended consequences.
So we'll have to see how these models get adopted and what kind of unintended consequences we see. But while we're talking about plans to dominate the world, Mark Zuckerberg in the news again this week. Definitely a guy with world domination ambitions, with a kind of clearer picture on the overall AI strategy for Meta. And it's all about you. Zuck says the company's North Star is now, quote, bringing personal superintelligence to everyone with an AI that kind of helps individuals pursue their personal goals rather than just automating tasks like the corporate co-pilots that are kind of so popular these days. He also made a big bet on smart glasses, calling them the computing platform of the future, a way to give AI real time multimodal context. I think videos, photos about what's going on around you, audio, so it can kind of hear and see all the things you're hearing and seeing and really be personalized to you like a truly personal assistant. But I guess that really raises a question. Do you want a truly personal super intelligence from Meta? I don't know.
I think to really unlock and tap into the full potential of these tools, we have to really think about these AI tools as a way to augment our own capabilities and capacities. And so we've always in medicine really used this term called augmented intelligence to think about that collaborative approach with these AI tools with human intelligence and how can we use that to really supercharge ourselves as opposed to us versus machine, which can be sometimes very threatening from our identity point of view. And also when you think about how we coexist in the world.
Do you want Meta being the one augmenting you? I don't know. I don't know if I trust those guys to have all my information, see everything I see, hear everything I hear. But the difference between a corporate owned or a medical facility owned and operated AI and a personal Jeff or Ivy AI is an interesting distinction, and certainly one Meta is well set up to deliver on as a personal individualized AI, kind of optimizing for what you want out of life versus what your employer may want you to optimize your time around.
Well, some would say that the AI integration into some of our Google tools, right, in email and in docs, already offer a glimpse and an early taste of that.
Indeed. Well, let's shift gears from dominating the world to helping to save it. Google DeepMind just dropped a powerful new model called Alpha Earth Foundations. I like that name. That's a good name. Alpha Earth Foundations. And it basically is an AI powered virtual satellite. Alpha Earth combines years of messy satellite data into clean, detailed maps of the Earth's surface, helping track deforestation, floods, and ecosystem shifts faster than ever before. It can incorporate real time data from multiple systems to give us an evolving picture of what's really going on in the world. It's the kind of system that could power new ESG dashboards, optimize supply chain routing, or help insurers understand environmental risks with near real time precision. This is always one of my favorite stories when we see AI kind of in strange ways, not exactly the bot or the chat bot or the glasses, but kind of making sense of large volumes of data to help people make better decisions or understand better what's going on in the world. Very cool to see large companies investing in this with not as clear of a like consumer play, but I think really foundational science that can help us improve the state of the world.
And I think it's very welcoming for folks who are interested and curious as citizen scientists to learn more about what's going on our planet. And it really creates a lot of agency for those who are passionate about this and thinking about how potential interventions, scientific inquiries can take advantage of this data and activate it in some kind of intervention or research.
Yeah, I'll be fascinated to see where this data gets utilized. They're working with a number of organizations to both build this data set, but also to understand how it could be utilized and leveraged in real practice. And of course, that's where I think the most value for these things is unlocked is when you go from, hey, we've got this cool new model that's like a virtual satellite with up-to-date information from 50 different sources to, hey, what can we do in this program to actually leverage that data to improve outcomes? And I think that's still coming for this project. It's not really here yet, but it'll be a fascinating one to watch because there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of need for this kind of capability, and Google out there making it available.
I think agree. The translational insights, right, and the what comes out of this will be very exciting and hopefully very inspiring.
Yep. Well, I'm going to switch gears now from saving the world to Hollywood, which I don't think of as a way that we really are saving the world. But some interesting news, a couple of different stories here. Amazon, first up, just quietly backing a startup called Fable, the startup behind an app called Showrunner, which some are calling the Netflix of AI. It just launched an alpha and lets users generate their own animated TV episodes simply by typing in prompts. Think of this as like choose your own adventure meets Chat GPT meets your Saturday morning cartoons.
Sounds pretty interesting. Can you give me an example here?
Yeah, the public alpha includes two original shows where fans can shape storylines, create new episodes, and even upload themselves as characters. If you wanted to see the cartoon version of you on screen doing something, this is your chance. It also points the way towards a future where animation is flexible, remixable, multiplayer, and totally personalized to you. The app is free for now, but they'll eventually be charging a monthly fee for generation credits of creating your own episodes or scenes. And they're planning to share revenue with creators when their content gets remixed by others. But this is a fascinating, like, it reminds me of a total shift in that it's just a different imagining of what's possible in entertainment when you go from a one way distribution to a two-way real-time creation. It's a very different vision of what the future of entertainment can look like, and it's really fascinating to see it taking shape. I'm not sure I'm ready to be in a cartoon myself. I've gone and uploaded my photo in my backyard and had Family Guy in my backyard, but I think that's kind of the future where you can kind of become a character in your favorite show.
Well, I think it lowers that threshold to really act upon creativity, which is exciting. And you can imagine when our kids were little, if they had access to these tools where it could really create visuals out of imagination, right, would be so much fun to see. And I'm definitely going to propose the next time you and Annie record your next pod to think about using this as a cartoon version. I would definitely subscribe to that.
It's a cartoon version of the what the AI pod will have to do. These technologies are fascinating too in the way they change culture. I remember when our son was young and he got a hold of my mother's phone and he kind of told her it was broken and she didn't know why. And he said, no Netflix. Like his expectation was that he could watch any show he'd ever seen on any device at any time. And I wonder when the next generation will come around and go, what do you mean I can't tell the character what to do? I have to watch somebody else's version of the show. I don't get to be in it. I don't get to change the outcome. I don't get to choose my own ending or choice for these characters. And so it'll be interesting to see if the world really shapes that way or not. But certainly opens up a lot of opportunity for creativity for people who are comfortable with these sorts of tools.
Absolutely. Exciting and terrifying at the same time, right? Sometimes when you turn these creative thoughts into a visual, is that what we imagined and as rich as what we imagine in our minds or not? I think that's something that's still TBD.
Well, if you want some more immediately useful ability to do something kind of terrifying, this next story is for you. Adobe has just launched some updates to Photoshop, and perhaps it made manipulation just a little bit too easy.
How so?
Well, they've rolled out some generative AI features that let users seamlessly add or remove people and objects from photos, the kind of stuff you've seen from a lot of people. But they also added a new feature called Harmonize, which automatically matches lighting, shadows, and color to blend new elements naturally into an image. That's the kind of finesse that usually required some serious editing skills, but now it's point and clicks. When you drag that weird object into your family photo, like it actually shadows and backgrounds and covers and changes the lighting to match. And it's really good. And so now it's getting easier and easier for people to manipulate. I can now remove people from an image and add new people into an image. It's almost impossible to tell. I don't know what that's going to do to creativity or our sense of reality and being able to believe what you see, but it's certainly kind of terrifying that it's now that easy to just manipulate a photo in an almost undetectable way.
I know how I feel about that. I'm a big fan of beautiful oops and finding beauty in imperfection. So I kind of like our family portraits where maybe our gazes are a little off, or there's someone making a funny face, or maybe we're taking a picture where we have a purposefully placed, background image. And I think making it too perfect kind of airbrushes the imperfections and sometimes the richness of real life.
The Japanese concept was it wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, the kind of improvement to perfection that comes from some kinds of imperfections, particularly those real-lived imperfections. I think there's something to that, and if we're optimizing for the wrong thing as we get these tools, but I gotta say, I'm gonna go into Photoshop and throw some stuff into photos and see how cool they look. Just throw random things in there and harmonize it up and see what happens.
You do you, bruh.
All right, we're gonna go into some more productivity type news coming out, a little bit less fun than the Photoshop, but maybe more practically useful for the audience. Some news out of Microsoft this week, their Edge browser getting a serious upgrade. They've rolled out something they call Copilot mode, which brings an AI assistant directly into the browser. And we're not just talking about a chatbot in the sidebar. This thing can actually analyze your open tabs, respond to voice commands, and even take actions for you across the web, like searching, summarizing, or even completing some simple tasks.
Well, I feel like we're hearing a lot about these new AI first browsers these days.
Yeah, indeed. This move puts Edge into what's becoming a real battle of the AI first browsers. We've seen similar agentic browsing come from Perplexity's Comet, which I've not gotten off the waitlist from. So, Perplexity team, please, I'd like to play with Comet. Help me out. The browser company's Dia launched just so past few months. We've seen more of this, and reportedly, OpenAI is writing its own browser as well. So, it's early days, and these tools are not always smooth, but it is clear that this is kind of the future. AI agents can do things for you inside your browser, and the browser is kind of the universal interface to everything we do on the computer. So when they can start using the browser, they can really take over all sorts of capabilities and possibilities for what they could be. So I think this will be a really interesting battlefront to see what kind of browser comes up. I'm still on the browser company's previous browser Arc, so please guys get me into some Perplexity. But I'll be really interesting to see what happens in the browser space because it does seem like the interface that is really natural for a lot of kind of advanced AI capabilities.
And I think the upstream implications and considerations are then what are the incentives for independent content creation, right? And how do we think about those sources and how we think about the value that's created there and how do we incentivize and reward that content creation despite the AI enabled browsers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've talked about Cloudflare's move to help content creators monetize their content in the context of AI crawling and browsing and content generation. But the what happens to the content creators in a world where all the content is summarized by a large language model and nobody actually reads it is a really difficult question on the economics of the future of the internet. And we'll have to see what happens on that front as we get more of these AI first browsers and what they really do. I think it's hard to predict how people's browsing and reading behavior will change. Do we read more? Because we can get a quick summary and then dive deeper into certain topics. Do we read less? I don't know. It remains to be seen.
I think these societal and ethical implications are something that I'm so grateful there are a lot of really smart folks thinking about it. And I think it's that necessary pause that sometimes we need to think about as tech charges forward and regulation and society kind of lags behind.
Well, while you mentioned tech charging forward, I'm going to take us to an update to one of our favorite AI tools. It's been a crowd favorite from the beginning, NotebookLM, maybe the only Google product that's really been well executed in the AI space other than just the models. They got a pretty slick upgrade here. It's rolling out a new feature called Video Overviews, which uses AI to turn your documents into narrated slideshows. Think of it as a more visual version of the audio overviews. So the AI doesn't just read your notes, it creates new visuals to help explain ideas, pulling in relevant images, diagrams, quotes, and numbers to make things like processes or abstract concepts easier to understand.
I think this is such a great move, especially thinking about how we really want to meet learners where they are, right? And we know that over time, our society the full spectrum of age and digital literacy is that there is a movement towards shorter attention spans, more visually accessible, and verbally accessible material. So, moving towards that TLDR version, and this is a wonderful example and definitely consistent with what we're seeing in the medical fields of the preference for kind of visual abstracts to boil down complex concepts and making it understandable and digestible for people to really understand these concepts. So I love it.
I've not gotten to play with this yet, but I'm really excited. Certainly, when I got the audio overviews, I felt awkward looking at my computer and listening to something for like 10 minutes and there's nothing on screen. It feels kind of weird. So I love this. I'm a visual learner, so having things in the visual space is great, and it gives me a little hope for Google too, because I think that the PM who was responsible for a lot of the Notebook LM work, Josh Woodward, is now in charge of the whole Gemini app and experience. And so this is the one real bright spot about real user experience innovations that Google has had in the AI space. The Gemini models are powerful and do really well, but the products have been kind of underwhelming, and this is the one exception. And love to see them continue to innovate on interesting ways to do this. But bring us to our last AI radar story. And this one is for all the parents out there. So if you've got kids in school, this one is for you. OpenAI just launched Study Mode, a new learning experience designed to help students think through problems step by step instead of just spitting out the answers.
I think this is a great approach and really thinking about how do we integrate this into traditional pedagogy, right? Which has not really been innovative in, and has not really, I think, truly adopted a lot of the digital advancements. And I know students and teachers already use ChatGPT. There's a lot of research and interest in terms of learning about kind of the implications of this, how it kind of causes us to pause and think about what we want to upskill, de-skill, reskill, and the importance of, cognitive offloading and friction in the process of long-term learning. So I think making it more of a guide and a scaffolded kind of approach would be great. But what does it really mean, you think?
Well, I mean, so this is going to be an interesting one. Study mode uses this kind of more Socratic approach. Instead of giving answers, it gives prompts, hints, feedback, kind of nudging you towards the right answer, kind of more like a tutor, if you will. I think it's great. I find that ChatGPT is it's a little too kind. In this idea of having different personalities, whether it's a teacher who's more Socratic and not going to give you the answer. Sometimes what I want is just the answer. And I get when I upload the scripts for this show, and give feedback, it always has to tell me how smart and thoughtful and brilliant and concise and insightful my commentary is. I'm like, I don't blow smoke up my ass. I don't need to hear that. Like, tell me what I need to improve. I want to know, can I shorten this? Which story should I cut? Should I reorder things? Give me the feedback. And so being able to tune this thing for different personalities and modes of interaction that you want. I want a more frank, just blunt, maybe rude mode in my, difficult high school English teacher mode in my chat GPT sometimes. And being able to have a supportive tutor teacher who knows how to ask the right questions to pull the stuff out, I think it'll be really valuable for students. Of course, the students who are trying to use ChatGPT to cheat will still just turn it off and go to the standard mode. So I don't think this is a solution to the problem of ChatGPT being available as a tool to help people in ways that maybe isn't useful. But for all the students who really want to learn material and want to learn it more quickly, this is going to be a great tool to be able to get a better approach from ChatGPT to help you go through all your materials and learn it well, prepare for that test in a way that's more evidence based in terms of how it interacts. So I'm excited to see this. I'm excited for our sons to get to play with it and see if this is a good way for them to leverage ChatGPT as a good tutor and instructor.
What a wonderful way to really think about personalized learning in a question based kind of approach, which we know have good evidence that that is a very helpful way if we can teach children, learners of all ages, to think and think through that process, kind of chain of thought, right, in terms of how we approach problem solving. So I think that's really exciting. And I think in medicine we talk a lot about people who use AI replacing or being supercharged compared to those who don't. And I think this will be true with students and also teachers who really thoughtfully integrate these tools and how they deliver their traditional classroom materials. And I'm actually really appreciative of the fact that these AI tools are sycophantic in that they are going to give you those platitudes because I won't, and I'll just give you the honest and blunt feedback. So I'm grateful for that, but I do agree that overall, the way that these tools have been developed can be very sycophantic, and hopefully we have now made improvements so that it's not that way, and that hopefully study and learn mode also includes that as well. Now, what if a student just asks for the answers here?
Yeah, the AI will push back. It'll direct you. It won't tell you. But again, you can turn off study and learn mode, and it'll probably just give you the answer. So again, I don't think this is a solution to that problem, but it is, I think, a great tool, and I'm looking forward to using it. I mean, I do think it now with these AI tools, whether you're a student in school or you're just a lifelong learner, the ability to take a curiosity, a question you have, and dive deep and learn about some new area, some new topic, some new thing that you're interested in is it's never been greater. And the opportunity to become expert or at least to learn a lot about any given thing is great. And one of the things I think is a skill everyone needs to really learn is this: we're so used to the end of the chapter being the end of your ability to learn. Like I finished what's in the book, so now I'm done. And learning to ask follow-up questions is such a great skill with these models because I just every time I ask a question, I read the answer. I'm like, oh my God, now I've got another question. And it turns into this ongoing thing where you can really dive deep. And I hope these kind of modes help students find the enjoyment of diving deep and learning these topics and helping them along the way as opposed to just giving the answer. So we'll see.
I think it'll accelerate learning for those who are curious, right? And turbocharge that. It's like pulling a thread, and that thread of curiosity can lead you to such breadth of topics, but also depth of topics, which I think is very exciting. And it lowers the barrier, I think, to learning and chasing that curiosity if you know how to use these tools, if you know how to critically analyze, right, and evaluate their outputs. I think it can be incredibly empowering. And I think we have to be forward thinking enough to really teach these literacy and fluency skills for both the students and also educators. And I think with the focusing on the educator community, thinking about how we really decrease their existential threat and fear of adopting these tools. I think there are some huge trailblazers at institutions like MIT and at Stanford who are really thinking about how do we thoughtfully and proactively study the integration of these tools to make sure that we get and kind of squeeze the most benefit and also put guardrails for risk mitigation in schools. And I think that's very, very exciting as we think about the leaders in that field, but also then how do we diffuse that and educate the teaching workforce on how to best harness these tools and not think of it as a shortcut or a route for cheating. That happens, but that happens with teachers too, right? Students may cheat with these tools. So can teachers. So, how do we think about then the ethical frameworks to think about this as well? And I think we, as a community and society, must think about that and really integrate a diverse set of voices and stakeholders to create thoughtful policies on this in responsible use.
All right, well, let's move on to AI in the wild and explore how some companies, communities, and creators are putting AI into action, highlighting practical, surprising, and maybe even wild use cases. All right, Ivy, what do you got for us this week in AI in the wild?
So, what happens when your top scientist never sleeps, never eats, and works in teams that meets for seconds, not hours?
It doesn't sound like a healthy lifestyle to me, honestly. That doesn't sound good to me. Tell me about what you mean, though.
Well, a team from Stanford and the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub just created a fully autonomous virtual lab made up of AI scientists. And these agentic AIs operate like a real research team. There's a principal investigator, what we call a PI, specialist researchers, and then collaborative debates on the question, the hypothesis and methodology, the works, except it all happens at machine speed.
All right, so machine speed, a principal investigator. I thought that was a private investigator. So I clearly, this is not my area of expertise. I know you've been a principal investigator before. How does this thing work? What does it really do?
Well, here's how it works. There's a central AI PI, so principal investigator, that assembles a task specific team of AI agents that can independently request tools, prior literature. And these tools can be like AlphaFold, right? And they evaluate trade offs and then they iterate designs, very much similar to the research meetings that we have in wet and dry labs across the country. So human scientists were only needed to really intervene in about 1% of cases, which is kind of wild to think about how you can really supercharge that workforce, right? Or in this case, a research team.
So is this a lab only thing yet? Have they produced anything of these virtual collabs and meetings and discussions actually produced anything of value at this point?
Well, in just days, the AI team generated 92 nanobody designs, two of which successfully bound to current SARS-CoV-2 variants in lab tests. And that's not a simulation. That's real world molecular binding validated in a physical lab.
This was a crazy story to me. I mean, we've seen a little bit of this with, Microsoft's MyDxO. We've seen a couple other kind of multi-agent stories, but and a bunch of them in the medical space. So I'm glad you're here to tell us if this medical stuff really works. But it's fascinating to me to see that we a need bunches of tools put together, and that b when you put like a bunch of LLMs together, which are really the same LLM but given different roles and like they actually are smarter than just one, which is just a fascinating reality and learning and opportunity for listeners of this podcast to figure out how do we do something like that in our world, a virtual team. It's a really fascinating. I mean, it's just surprising me that that does more than just telling the LLM what you want it to do. You got to like tell it to do different roles and specify and then put them together.
Well, this is a wonderful example of how AI tools are really transforming the whole R&D departments of life sciences, right? In terms of when we think about traditional pipelines for research and drug design or drug testing, which used to span multiple years, decades plus, right? How you can really shrink that time and accelerate the R&D process, save costs, and bring insights to bedside in a shorter timeline. So incredibly exciting. And I think we're starting to see also aspects of this as you've talked about in prior podcasts with the Microsoft Diagnostic AI operator, thinking about how do you have a AI panel of experts, with different prompts or different roles and how they can really harmonize as a team to accelerate where you go from input to output. And I think that's a really smart way to think about how do we more efficiently deploy our limited resources and human capital.
How do you think about I mean, it seems to me like whenever there's a step function increase in capability like this, where you're saying, "Hey, we can evaluate so many more things, we can move so much faster with a technology like this," it also seems like the people involved need to change their thinking because the realm of what's possible, you go, "Oh, we would never have considered doing X before because it just, like, would have taken too long, we couldn't test all these variants, we could never go" no, it's just that we don't go that route, and now all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, we actually can do that really quickly." So it feels like there's a shift in mindset or training needed for the principal investigators, the real life principal investigators, to understand what kinds of avenues these sorts of tools open up that were closed before, and compared to things where you say, "This isn't the way we approach this kind of problem because it's not cost efficient. It takes too many people. It takes too many hours. It'll never work. We do this other thing." So it feels to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there's like a shift in how we think about what avenues to pursue because the what's possible and feasible is just very different than it might have been before.
And it changes the mindset of individuals, of teams, and also organizations as we think about, okay, now that we've advanced the frontier of what AI is capable of, how do we rethink, you know, human roles, right? And jobs and scopes and responsibilities, knowing that we can expedite or increase efficiency in doing certain tasks that AI is great at. And so organizations have already kind of redesigned roles, thinking about how to best kind of incorporate these tools and use it in a collaborative, augmentative way to their human workforce, right? And since you are offloading some of these tasks, right, to AI agents, what does that mean with the freed up time, right, and cognition for humans so that you can really either whether it's translating these AI outputs into the real world or furthering it along in the drug development pipeline. I think a lot of organizations are rethinking that, adjusting workforce, needs, and then also reskilling their human workforce and how to use these tools to maximize the potential in terms of outputs and benefits to patients in this case.
Or for all the listeners who aren't doctors out there, I think this applies to all sorts of use cases, whether you're talking about product design, marketing strategy, risk analysis. This model of having a team of AI agents that have different roles and can work together to ask big questions and allow you to kind of iterate and collaborate in a different way. I think is a really useful model. There's a bunch of tools, both open source and paid, that are available out there. So give it a shot. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us about a time that AI surprised you. Tell you one way it's changed your daily routine, how you're actually using it in your day-to-day life, what's working, what's not. Send us your stories, your prompts, your favorite use cases, and you just might hear them featured in an upcoming episode. As always, you can find us at email@whattheai.fm. But now to wrap things up, let's dive into our AI alignment section where we unpack the latest debates, policies, and ethical questions shaping a safer and smarter AI future. All right, Ivy, bring us home. What is our story for AI alignment this week?
Well, so we've talked a lot about education. Now, what if schools told students to use AI more and not less?
I think students would be happy with that. I think they would, and I think they would like it. And they give me the more AI. I like it. Sounds good.
Well, that's exactly what's happening across China's top universities, where the message to students has flipped from "be careful" to "get fluent." I think they took the Toby Lutke approach kind of to and acted upon that. So, just 2 years ago, Chinese students had to jump through VPN hoops to access ChatGPT. Today, they're logging into school-hosted versions of DeepSeek with their student IDs, and professors are dedicating entire lectures to AI prompt engineering. So in China, generative AI isn't a cheating risk, it's a competitive skill.
So that's a fascinating set of like anecdotal stories about things that are happening. And it feels right. Is there any data that suggests that this is more than the story we're telling ourselves about what we hear, that this is a real thing going on in China?
Well, according to a Micus Institute survey, 99% of university students and faculty in China now use AI tools, and nearly 60% of them use them frequently. Beijing has mandated AI instruction from K through 12 through university, and Xinhua, Renmin, and Zhejiang are embedding AI across disciplines, from law and literature to medicine and the humanities. And there's a cultural tailwind. A Stanford HAI report found that 80% of Chinese respondents are excited about AI services, more than double the percentage in the US or UK.
That number was striking to me, the doubling the percentage of people who are excited about AI. I mean, you've seen a lot of the public discourse here in the US and in Western Europe in particular is around the concerns about the downsides of this. And it feels like the Chinese are really leaning into the potential upsides. I guess when you're on the rise versus at the top and, maybe seeing some decline as maybe you could argue Western Europe has economically, it feels more like the upside is bigger for you and the downside you're less worried about. But that seems like a pretty different cultural experience. But I'm curious, what are the practical ways they're putting this into practice? Like, what are people doing with it? How are professors recommending it? It's always interesting to get down to like the nuts and bolts of like, what are people really doing here?
Well, universities are establishing new general education colleges, launching interdisciplinary AI degrees, and deploying their own campus wide large models with advanced features that go beyond free public versions. Professors are encouraging students to use AI as a brainstorm partner or devil's advocate for shaping arguments, and recommending it for tasks like drafting abstracts, generating charts, and writing literature reviews. And some faculty even provide prompt templates and run full sessions on responsible AI use, treating it as a core academic skill.
That just feels so relevant to me for schools here in the US too. The question of, do we teach you how to use it responsibly? Do we help you? I mean, the idea of teachers giving prompts is fascinating. I don't think that happens a lot in our schools or universities here, but that leaning into this as a digital literacy skill for the 21st century makes a lot of sense. And I was just talking to an educator yesterday, and he was saying, like, if part of your job as a university or a K-12 school is preparing students for the real world, like this is going to be a tool that they will be expected to use and use intelligently in their jobs, in there if you're K-12 in your college experience. And so pretending that's not true is just kind of crazy. And I think we've got to I love this idea of leaning into building this as a skill and doing it cross-disciplinary. Seems like a smart approach. Is that a you agree, disagree? Should we be doing more of this here in the US?
I think we need to have a more balanced approach, and we can learn from this, I think, in the US. I must say, when I was reading this article about China's approach and strategy, it is a little scary, to think about how heavily and aggressive they are leaning into their and indulging their techno optimism. I think as we've used these tools in medicine and education, and the research supports that a lot of our values, our societal values, the ethics, how what we ground as truth in these tools is really important. And they can hold a mirror to how what currently exists in society and exacerbate biases and disparities or falsehoods, right? And so I think before deploying it, mandating it, and fully immersing students and teachers with this, I think there needs to be someone on the team, right, who is looking at the evidence and prospectively studying how these tools are used, how it impacts skill development and retention in terms of learning, and how we identify biases, inaccuracies, hallucinations, right? The risks that we see with using these tools before we go all in. And I think that's where some of the leading institutions in America and the EDU space have been very impressive in terms of, again, studying how these tools are used, where we have blind spots in how they function and how they perform, and critically thinking about what human skills do we need to develop and focus on as we collaborate and use these tools as students and also as teachers. So I like the excitement that China has over these tools. I like their forward approach and kind of thinking about how do we diffuse these skills and these AI tools to a large swath of the population. I think thinking about what are the best ways to do that, what are the things that we need to be mindful of in terms of risks for long-term educational retention, skill development, the implications on academic integrity, right? And creativity of thought and outputs. and how do we assess those, and really building up that muscle for critical evaluation of these tools is really important. And I think some of the leading institutions that are doing that work are in the US.
Well, hopefully we will see a balanced approach. I certainly have seen the techno optimists and the techno doomers are all out there in force. China leaning heavy into the optimist angle, and hopefully there's a balance in it. It's I think one of the challenges will always be like I'd love to see the evidence on what works and what doesn't, but it'll be years before we have real knowledge of what has long term educational improvements and not. And some people will either be ahead or behind depending on whether they made the right bet on which way this was going. So it's a tough landscape to navigate when you don't really have a full set of information about what the right choice is. And we'll all be navigating that, I think, for a while because as soon as a survey comes out about what works and what doesn't, the capabilities of the models have shifted dramatically and go, oh, well, that data is not right. That's a 2-year-old model. That doesn't tell us anything. So it's going to be a difficult time to navigate with opportunities and risks on both sides. And I think finding that sweet spot middle ground will be, a challenge, but probably the path that most here in the US will attempt to navigate.
Well, I'm not proposing, I think, analysis paralysis here, but I do think, especially as we think about how AI tools really accelerate timelines, to think about rapid iteration and analysis, right? Anytime you deploy some of these tools, you really want to think about post deployment monitoring and surveillance and, choosing what metrics should we measure, right? Or not. And what does the early data tell us so that we can really incorporate how these tools are used, the data that we glean from the use cases and the outputs, and then how do we iterate forward, right? In terms of thinking about how can we use these tools for good, minimize the risks, and co-evolve with these tools and really, I think, achieve that augmented intelligence that we're all talking about.
Yeah, I think that concept of iterate, and it reminds me of that old quote, like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, if you're waiting to know exactly what you should do, you're gonna be waiting a long time. But if and that's not gonna work. But you also can't just like rush headlong into this thing. So figuring out how to learn quickly, how to iterate, and accepting that part of this process is gonna be, changing your policy, changing your approach relatively rapidly. It's kind of, I think, challenging for many academic institutions that are used to like one time we set the policy and this is the policy and it lasts a generation. And that's really not how this is going to evolve. And so I think that'll be a key skill maybe for every institution, academic and otherwise, to figure out how do we get smart about adapting, evolving, learning, iterating, and accepting that having it wrong the first time is not a problem. It's like it's expected and we just got to get it better the second time and even better the third and the fourth and move towards evolve forward. I think you said is a great description of where we've got to get. So wait eagerly to see how we navigate this landscape because it's going to be challenging, but there's a lot of opportunity.
This requires mindset shift, right? And this is why I think the regulatory landscape has been slow to think about how do you create living policies that will evolve? How do you set guardrails and not create guidelines that are too restrictive of innovation, but also make sure that we are moving towards our societal values and North Star while mitigating risks. And I think as a society, right, we really need to think about this as, again, a evolutionary process that ideally is led by human values.
Sounds very human-centered AI, Stanford Institute, iterative process led by human values. I love it. That will be, I guess, our final word. You get it as usual. Final word from my wife. But that's it for this week on What the AI. We'll be back soon with more insights, breakdowns, and just plain old What the AI moments from the world of artificial intelligence. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone you know trying to navigate the age of AI. And don't forget to send us your questions, prompts, and favorite AI stories. As always, we're at email at whattheAIFM. You just might get featured next time. So we will see you next week. And thanks so much, Ivy, for hopping in and guest hosting this week.
Thank you, Keltner. Always a pleasure to collaborate.
Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover what the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email at whattheai.fm. We really do read every message and we do our best to cover them all on the show.